Hey there, OncoPTs, and welcome to this episode of the OncoPT Podcast. My name's Elise, and I am so glad that you are here today. I don't know about you, but here in Texas, it is kind of spring right now. I don't know if we're fully done with winter. I feel like yesterday was summer, so it must be spring in Texas. I hope you're having a much more pleasant spring than what we're having here. But regardless of where you're joining me from, spring is totally in the air right now, at least for the Northern Hemisphere, which means it's probably time for planting and weeding and seeding and all the gardening things. I don't actually know that because I am the queen of actually killing plants, so I'm not allowed near any green things in our house. So if you're here for some gardening advice, this is the wrong podcast, my friend. But if you're here for some honest OncoPT conversations, you're totally in the right place. We're not going to do any more gardening lessons here. So while I'm not out there fertilizing gardens or touching them in any capacity, this episode is going to be some good old fertilizer for your OncoPT career. As we're emerging from what felt like a crazy winter, there's a lot of opportunity to stretch and grow this spring, especially in your clinical practice. But you may be hesitant to trying new approaches for one simple reason. You want to avoid making mistakes. No, don't get me wrong. We all want to be the safest physical therapists possible for our patients. I want that for you. I know you want that for you. But sometimes you can actually confuse the pursuit of safe practice with being overly cautious, too cautious even. And this can actually harm our patients rather than help them. I don't know about you, but when I was growing up, I was very much incentivized not to make mistakes. Like I had to be perfect. And I think that was both an external and an internal thing for me. I think I took it and I ran with it. And so I was so afraid of making mistakes. And I felt like I had some control over that in school, like in high school, elementary school, middle school, etc. Kind of changed in college. And then PT school, like that entire paradigm changed. But I always really wanted to have the exact framework, the exact instructions so that I could carry them out perfectly. Like if you gave me a patient with, I don't know, a knee replacement, I'm just throwing this out there right now. If you gave me a patient with a knee replacement, I would follow that protocol to the letter. I'm a really good rule follower in that sense. And I feel like that served me okay when I was doing some of my clinical rotations. But as I kind of developed further and further, seeing new patients, seeing different diagnoses, and especially when I got into the oncology world, that had to be thrown out the window. Like this whole concept of, at 2 weeks after a knee replacement, you can do this, this, and this. At 4 weeks, you can do this, this, and this. We don't have that in oncology. And I think that's actually sometimes a good thing, sometimes a bad thing, but we'll talk more about that here in a bit. But I bring this up because if you're like me, you tend to be risk averse. And it comes from a place of you want to be the best physical therapist possible, you want to show up, and you don't want to hurt your patients. But I think when we approach it from, I don't want to hurt my patients, rather than, I want to really help my patients, those are different things. I don't know if you've ever thought about that before. When we approach patient care from, I don't want to hurt my patients, instead of, I want to help my patients, this can totally change the trajectory of our patients and their progress through our plan of care. It's pretty powerful to think about, right? So I bring all this up again because we need to embrace mistakes. And that's so cringy to think about at first. Like it makes my heart hurt a little bit to hear that. But making mistakes is actually a really important part of growing. Mistakes teach us not only what not to do, but also what to do instead. One incredibly memorable mistake that I made as a student physical therapist. So I'm doing an evaluation on a patient. This was actually my oncology rotation. So I'm like fully in, loving every minute of what I'm doing. And so this was like early on when I was really starting to take on evaluations by myself. And again, like I had been doing evaluations previously, but these were more complicated. And my CI did such a good job of like gradually bringing me into all that. So anyways, this was like one of my early ones where I'm like doing it by myself. It was so cool. So I'm writing, I'm doing my documentation. I'm like, this is the best evaluation I have written thus far in my career. Like, this needs to be framed. And I was just about to sign my evaluation when I discovered something catastrophic. I documented the evaluation in the wrong patient chart. And this was not like my current documentation system. I could not just have the two charts open and then copy and paste back and forth. I had to go through and I had to cut all of the text from the chart. And I did a lot of free typing there, put it into a separate document, do that for the entire chart before I could then exit out of that chart, open up the other chart, the correct chart, and then put everything back in there. And then I had to, of course, document for that other patient that I documented erroneously for. It took me hours after the clinic closed to finish this because that documentation system was the worst. So the lesson I learned from that, it still pains me to this day. The lesson I learned from that mistake is that I now double check the patient chart every time I start documenting. Like I have to see the name at least 2 or 3 times to know for sure I am documenting in the right chart. So again, while this was annoying, it was so annoying, this is a pretty innocuous mistake. Nobody died. Nobody was in danger of dying from this mistake. And I hear you, right? You're probably saying, Elise, what about patient care? People, like we're dealing with humans in the patient care side of things. Like somebody could totally die. They could. You're right. But the likelihood that the interventions you are doing with your patient killing them is really low. It's really low, right? If we're being smart about it, that's really not a concern for, I'm going to say, like 95 to 99% of the patients that we work with. And to put a little humor on this, my good friend Tori told me this weekend, which I totally agree with. She said, Elise, everybody's dying just at different rates. She's not wrong, y'all. But jokes aside, in cancer rehab, there is an overwhelming amount of fear and uncertainty when working with oncology patients. And this could be due to a variety of different things, right? We know that cancer is a scary diagnosis. There's no denying that. Cancer is scary. Sometimes it's definitely scary for our patients, but sometimes it's also scary for us, especially when we're newer to working with this patient population. Maybe the fear of God instilled in our hearts by our professors in PT school around the contraindication of modalities and cancer being a contraindication for everything we do is contributing to that fear. I know that's definitely the case for me, at least it was. But maybe it's also the apprehension of treating patients who are so medically complex and dynamic and all the things, right? I'm thinking about the first time I ever worked with a patient who had bone metastases, right? All of these concerns and considerations are valid to a degree. But what I see more often than anything else in cancer rehab is underdosing and not challenging our patients enough appropriately. Remember, thinking back to, there is a difference between treating patients so as not to hurt them and treating patients to help them. Those are very different. And what I want you to take away from this is we need to be treating patients to help them, not out of a place of fear. Because again, not only does that not help our patients, this is what is holding our profession back. The entire field of cancer rehab, this is what is holding us back. I heard a quote last week, actually for the second time. I've heard this quote previously, and I kind of laughed it off, but it wasn't until I heard this quote for the second time last week that I really kind of sat back and thought, you need to think about this a little bit. So I've really gotten into the House of Herbie podcast by Queen Herbie. She's a rapper, if you haven't heard of her before. And the quote she said was, "Shit is the best fertilizer." And again, get your giggles out now because I totally giggled the first time I heard it. But when you start to think about it, this is so true. And it's so applicable for cancer rehab. I think that's what shocked me probably the most when I really thought about it. I was like, oh, I feel called out right now. In a good way, right? So when you sit with this and when you kind of think about the context and the meaning behind this, this is a really appropriate approach or way to move forward in cancer rehab with this mentality of I want to help my patients rather than I want to not hurt my patients. So in gardening, we're bringing the gardening back around, y'all. In gardening and farming, I'm revealing my Midwestern roots right now. Manure, aka shit, is frequently used as fertilizer to help plants grow because there are nutrients in it, right? But shit is also the best fertilizer in OncoPT, in cancer rehab. And what I mean by shit, I don't mean trash. I don't mean like purposely picking things that are harmful to patients. That is not what we're going for here. When I say shit, when I think of fertilizer, I think of this, I equate this in cancer rehab as trying different things, trying new things, trying different approaches, interventions, perspectives, etc., even if they don't seem like the conventional way of addressing XYZ impairment. Now, typically, when we implement an intervention or an approach, etc., there's going to be one of two outcomes. Number one, it's going to work. Or number two, it's not going to work. Now, if it doesn't work, then we say, all right, that didn't work. We're going to try something new next time. But if it does work, we're helping our patients with something that we probably would not have even thought of previously. We wouldn't have tried it. And so when we approach things from this is an opportunity to try something different, to try something unique, to try something that maybe I normally wouldn't do, but I want to try it in this situation. I think how we treat lymphedema is a pretty good example of this. So if we think about if lymphedema were a brand new condition today, right? If the first person to ever develop lymphedema developed it in the year 2023, our reaction to that, unfortunately sometimes still today, but I digress, our reaction to a person experiencing swelling is, let's get you on some diuretics because we know that helps for swelling, or at least some swelling. Or in maybe a different situation, let's drain it, right? Let's drain that fluid out of there. Now, you and I know that is actually two of the worst things that we could really do if we are going to appropriately manage lymphedema for a person. But based on our current awareness and what we know about swelling is like, those are sometimes some really appropriate interventions for other people with swelling. So by that line of thought, like it should work for lymphedema. Again, you and I know differently. So imagine then, when lymphedema treatment was really starting to take off in Europe over the last century, this person or these persons came up with this kind of crazy, a little harebrained approach of managing lymphedema, at least by my standards, right? So instead of let's give them medicine, let's drain the fluid, they said, you know what, we're going to put these patients in a series of bandages. They're not going to be like East bandages. They're going to be something called short stretch bandages. We're going to do different exercises to help the fluid move. And then we're also going to do this manual technique that it's not a massage because it's not getting down and, deep into the muscles. It's a little lighter than that. People probably thought that those individuals were out of their mind, right? At face value, that kind of sounds like a bad idea. Again, thinking about because of what we know about other swellings and their response to diuretics, draining the fluid, etc. But then pivot, and lymphedema does not respond to those things. In fact, those things can even make lymphedema worse. And again, nowadays, complete decongestive therapy is very much accepted as this is what we do for patients with lymphedema. Now, does it need updates? Yeah, totally. Like we needed some work in here. But at the time, I imagine it was quite groundbreaking. And I also imagine that at the time, there were a lot of people who were like, you're crazy. Like, you need go get out of town because you're not going to do that to my patients and your crazy ideas. Like, that's just not going to work. And sure enough, it is. And it's still being used today. So these seemingly, quote, harebrained ideas, these implementation of new approaches are how we actually advance cancer rehab. We're not done advancing cancer rehab. We still have a lot to learn. And unfortunately, I think that we have really kind of stagnated over the past few years as far as how do we really improve cancer rehab. Has there been progress made? Yes. But I think that we have kind of slowed down and we need to get back on track. And I think a lot of it stems from we are practicing as an industry mainly out of I don't want to hurt my patients rather than I want to help my patients. And I'm going to continue to challenge you. You need to be practicing over here. I want to help my patients. This needs to outweigh the fear of hurting them. And so, again, how we do this is by changing our perspective, our approach to making mistakes. Mistakes are not a bad thing all the time. In fact, they are growth opportunities. They are opportunities for innovation, right? And so I want you to get out there and I want you to try new things. I want you to curate opportunities for innovation in your practice by thinking outside of the box. What shit can you try that could potentially really help your patient? And if you're thinking right now, Elise, this all sounds fine and dandy, but like, I know I'm afraid still of making mistakes. Girl, same. We're going to work on it together. Here are 5 steps that we are going to work on together to make this happen that I want you to implement in your practice if we're really going to transform cancer rehab. So step 1 is cultivate curiosity. Curiosity is the absolute key to turning mistakes into opportunities for growth. Again, no longer look at them as mistakes, but opportunities to grow. Curious people tend to ask more questions. And it's not just the asking of the question that is so important here. It's as we ask the questions, we are then thinking and seeking the answers. We're seeking out new information to inform our approach, again, to maybe give us those answers, but also what can we try to address, again, XYZ impairment here. And curious people are more open to new experiences. Again, maybe implementing a little different approach to some traditional interventions to help address or treat an impairment. When you're curious, you're more likely to seek out feedback and reflect on your actions, which can help you identify areas for growth and development. So step 1 is cultivate curiosity in you, in yourself. Step 2 is then we got to act on it, and then we're going to reflect on our growth opportunity. So get out there, do the thing, right? Lay down some shit fertilizer, and reflect on your growth opportunity. Taking the time, and this does require you to take time here, taking the time to reflect on your mistakes or your growth opportunities, right? That's what we're branding them from now on. And what you can learn from them is crucial to both personal and professional growth. Reflecting on these growth opportunities allows you to examine your actions, your thought processes, your decision-making skills that ultimately got you to where you are today, right? As you're having these reflections with yourself, maybe even with others on, you know what, I tried this thing and it didn't work with my patient. What can you take away from that process, right? It's not just a, I made the mistake. I'm going to move on, right? No, we have to sit with it for a little bit. We have to let it stew a little bit so that we can kind of draw out what is this information that we need to be reflecting on right now. And reflecting on our growth opportunity allows you to identify areas for improvement and also develop strategies to prevent similar mistakes from happening in the future. And again, we are not trying to avoid mistakes altogether. We're trying to say, okay, this didn't work this time. What should I be taking away from this so that I don't make a same mistake or a similar mistake in the future? What can I try differently that maybe will work next time? So step 2 is reflecting on your growth opportunity. Step 3 is now learning from it. And they go very much hand in hand here. Embrace your mistakes. Embrace your growth opportunities. Only by doing this are we going to develop a growth mindset, increasing your resilience and ultimately improving patient outcomes, right? We are not, right? You and me, we are not going to make mistakes and then hide them from the world. Because what happens in this case is not only do you feel shame about this mistake that like, no, friend, we're not doing shame anymore. Okay. Shame has been thrown out the window. Not only are you hiding that, are you feeling shame about that mistake, you are also preventing other physical therapists and other healthcare professionals from learning from your mistake. And this is such an underrated thing that in doing so, again, in hiding away and being embarrassed about the mistakes we make, friend, you are not the only one making mistakes out there. People are making the same mistakes as you, and everyone else is doing the same thing. They're like, I'm just not going to talk about it. I'm going to sweep that under the rug. Then they're not able to learn from your mistakes either. You're not able to learn from their mistakes. When you make a mistake, it's an opportunity to learn and improve your practice. You make a mistake, you reflect on it, you learn from it, and you learn to do different. You learn to do better next time. By embracing your mistakes, by embracing these growth opportunities, you're also more likely to take risks. And I don't mean like uncalculated, no seatbelt kind of risks here, right? I'm talking about calculated risks. This didn't quite work last time, but what if I just changed it a little bit and tried it a little differently this time, right? What if I tried this new approach that maybe works for this patient population over here, but hasn't been tested in my patient population? I'm going to take it. I'm going to adapt it to my patient right here, right now, right? So when we are embracing our mistakes, when we're learning from these growth opportunities, we're more likely to take risks, and you're more likely to try new approaches, which ultimately leads to not only innovation in cancer rehab, but better outcomes for your patients. That's what we're all about, right? That's what we're out here doing the thing. So as you're learning from your mistake, it's time to move into step 4, which is collaborating with colleagues, right? This is kind of that whole sharing the mistakes, sharing the growth opportunities, learning from them collectively. Working with others, sharing this information with other physical therapists, other rehab professionals, other physicians, other nurses, helps you learn from the mistakes and ultimately grow in your career, right? When collaborating with others, not only do you have the opportunity to teach them what you've learned from your growth opportunity, but they can also provide insight and perspective that maybe can put a little different light on that growth opportunity that you now have, right? Maybe this mistake was a mistake only because you didn't have all of the information or the right approach to the situation to where that intervention you were thinking of could have been successful, right? So as we're collaborating, as you're communicating, collaborating with your colleagues, it's important to share your experiences, ask for feedback, and ultimately learn from these other perspectives, which is going to in turn help you develop new skills, new approaches, but again, ultimately improve your patient outcomes. Best of all, By sharing your mistakes, this absolutely, like I said earlier, helps others not make the same mistake, but also consider in their own practice, what are some innovative ways to help my patients that are similar in this situation, right? Maybe you're working with a patient with multiple myeloma right now who's experiencing blah, blah impairments. And while you're maybe trying some interventions, some treatment approaches that maybe aren't working for this patient, maybe your colleague is going to see a patient next month with multiple myeloma, and they're going to say, you know what? That didn't work for that patient, but maybe it could work for my patient. Maybe this didn't work for this patient, but if I tweaked it a little bit, it could work with my patient. And that's helping. Again, this is not just about helping your patients. This helps all of us. This helps all of our patients when we're collaborating in these growth opportunities like this. Now, this last step here tends to be absolutely the one that is glossed over, forgotten, ignored, and just not done the most out of all of these. Step 5 is to celebrate and share your successes. We don't just want to acknowledge our mistakes, right? We don't just want to acknowledge the opportunities that we have for growth. We also want to acknowledge and share and celebrate your wins, your successes. And I'm not just talking the big ones here. I'm talking the little ones too, because no matter how small these successes are, these help you build momentum and confidence in your career as a physical therapist. Celebrating your successes helps you stay motivated and focused on your goals, and also reminds you of the progress you've made. Think back to the very first oncology patient you ever worked with. Picture him in your head. Remember that? Remember how it went? I don't know how it went for you. I know how it went for me. I remember my very first solo eval as a licensed physical therapist. Whew, that was rough. I've told this story previously. I'll give you the brief summary here. Very first day of working as a big girl licensed physical therapist, I was in the cancer center. This was my dream, y'all. Like everything I'd wanted to do was coming to fruition. And it started off quite rough. Few mishaps throughout the morning. And my very first evaluation, it was a 9 a.m. evaluation. And this woman had breast cancer. And, you know, breast cancer was obviously of major concern, but she also had some familial issues going on. And y'all, when I tell you that we were in the private exam room and she broke down in tears and she was crying, I was almost crying along with her. And I remember telling her, like, it's okay to cry here. This is a safe space. And when I got home that night and I was telling my sister about it, she said, you weren't telling your patient that. You were telling you that. I was like, maybe I was. So anyways, that's one of my very early memories of working with this patient population. And wow, I've come a long way since then. I've made a lot of mistakes. I have made a lot of learning and growth opportunities along the way. But I've also had a lot of successes, and I know you have too. By celebrating, by sharing these successes, you're helping to build a positive mindset, which is important when you're facing those challenges and overcoming those obstacles, right? There are going to be not good days. There are going to be bad days. There are probably going to be days where you are trying not to cry in the evaluation, like I did on my first day. And that's okay. These days are going to happen. But it's on those days that it's so critical that you can remember the successes and the wins that you've had along the way, because you have acknowledged them and celebrated them along the way. Not just in you, but sharing them with others, right? Because again, there's a lot that others can learn from you. When you approach mistakes as growth opportunities, it not only helps you become the best physical therapist, it only helps you become the best physical therapist possible for your patients. Now, you might be thinking right now, Elise, what if I don't make mistakes? What if I'm perfect? What if I'm literally the perfect OncoPT? Okay, maybe you are. But I'm going to guess probably not. And if you're not making mistakes, I'm challenging you with this. you're not practicing big enough. I'm not saying you need to be practicing big by working at a major medical university system, etc. That's not at all what I'm saying. But if you're not making mistakes, I truly believe you are practicing from a place of fear and not wanting to hurt your patients rather than the deep-seated desire to actually help your patients. I want you to be over here, friend. I want us all to be over here. It's very tempting to skip out on those steps that I outlined. So remember, step 1, let me scroll back up here, cultivate curiosity. Step 2, reflect on your growth opportunity. Step 3, learn from your growth opportunity. Step 4, collaborate with colleagues. Step 5, celebrate and share your successes. It is very tempting to skip out on these steps because, again, we in healthcare, especially I think in physical therapy, we have a very risk-averse culture. And for somewhat of a good reason, right? We ultimately do no harm, right? And we want to help our patients. But I think sometimes we are more focused on the do no harm instead of the help the patient, right? Like really help the patient. It is very tempting to keep mistakes secret and hidden. But this is only keeping us where we are, and I would say even like going backwards. We need to be going forwards, y'all. But this mentality, we're getting dragged into the past. By sharing what you've learned, you are helping your colleagues now, but also the next generation of physical therapists learn from your mistakes. You are curating a culture of curious collaboration, which is ultimately helping patients get the care they need. You're out there teaching. You have the opportunity to be out there teaching others. And it's by being the best version of yourself, the best version of OncoPT that you can be, that we are really going to make a difference in our profession and for our patients. For my patients, for your patients, for all of our patients. This topic gets me really excited because we are sitting on so much potential to really advance cancer rehab and oncology physical therapy as we know it. We are on the cusp. We have an incredible opportunity to be doing this right now, but none of that happens if we're holding that information to ourselves. And I actually think one of the best ways that we can really implement these steps into our practice, if we're really going to talk the talk and walk the walk, one of the best ways that we can do this, that you can do this, is by writing a case report. I don't know of a better way of communicating what you have learned, what you would not do in the future, but also what you would do in the future with this patient, than a case report. It's perfect. And again, thinking about this is a way of reflecting and learning from a growth opportunity, right? This is collaborating with colleagues, sharing this information with others. This is celebrating your wins and your successes, sharing that information, which is only going to help patient care improve for all. And that's what we're here for, right? Now, if you're serious about turning your mistakes into growth opportunities and sharing that with the world, I highly encourage you to write a case report. There is still so much that we don't know about cancer rehab. And while I think we tend to defer to randomized control trials, meta-analyses, systematic reviews, like we know those are good for a reason. But those don't start all by themselves one day. Like randomized control trials do not magically come out of the air. They start with case reports. They start with one. They start with one patient. Case reports are truly the first step in advancing our knowledge and our understanding of best practice cancer rehab. And if you want to actually start and finish your case report, then you are going to love my new and improved case report writing workshop. In Case Report Writing Workshop, you will learn how to write a high-quality case report that meets the rigorous standards of ABPTS. This 8-hour course covers the fundamentals of case report writing and includes various exercises to help you get started on the process. What this means is it is perfect for physical therapists who are looking to complete the ABPTS specialty application. Now, you can take my word for it, or you can hear from one of my former students, Cherie. Now, Cherie is a physical therapist, private practice owner, and she actually took case report writing workshop last year as she was writing her case report. And here's what she has to say about this. Before taking the case report writing workshop, I felt overwhelmed and not knowing how to start. After taking the workshop, my thoughts were more organized and I could then know how to complete the task. Y'all, not just start it, but finish it. I would not have included a CARES statement if I did not take this class. Side note, this is a really important part of the case report that most people forget. Back to the testimonial here. I did not have to do any rewrites on my case study. I felt it was a very intensive class, but well worth my time. Cherie, girl, killing it. So, y'all, she's busy, right? She has a life. She has a family. She has things that she wants to do that do not include writing a case report. Like, she does not want to devote her time to doing that. She doesn't have the time. Again, she has a private practice. She's working with patients. She has employees that she's managing. She's out there in the community building her practice to serve the most patients that she possibly can. She doesn't have time to waste on this. And by taking this case report, she was able to not only start but finish. She had all of the necessary components and had such a kick-ass case report, she didn't have to do any rewrites. Like, the thing she wrote was perfect. And she submitted it, and then she could move on with her life. Like, amazing. It's incredible. It gets me so excited about this. Now, I know what you're wondering. Elise, what about CEUs? Girl, I got you covered. It's approved for 8 CEU hours for physical therapists. Case Report Writing Workshop is now open, improved, and ready for you to dive right in at TheOncoPT.com/case report. And I cannot wait to see you in there. You are going to love it. If you want to start and finish your case report without losing your mind in the process, you need this course. Again, you can grab your seat at TheOncoPT.com/case report, and I can't wait to see you in there. Until next time, this is Elise with the OncoPT. And remember, you are exactly the physical therapist that your patients with cancer need. So let's get to work.